G'day mate, 40 here. Season 3 of the Newsreader has dropped. It's an Australian public broadcaster, ABC, Australian Broadcasting Company production about TV newsreaders based in, I think in Victoria, in Sydney or in Melbourne, and in Australia from 1985 to 1989. And I like the show, good ratings, good reviews. And interesting part of season 3 is that the lead character throws a fit at work, and her producer hands her a note saying, think about calling this therapist. And so the newsreader calls the therapist and comes in and starts doing dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. And then after a few weeks of this, she becomes curious and she goes to a library and she researches dialectical behavioral therapy, and she learns that it's often used to deal with borderline personality disorder. And most mental health professionals are extremely scared of dealing with borderlines because it's not a great rate of recovery for people with borderline personality disorder, and they tend to be very difficult clients. And if you got a borderline in your life, I'm sorry, I've got a borderline in my life, and this is how I notice it operates. If somehow their shame gets triggered, and it could be the most innocuous thing, they would just fly into a fit. Or if you only primarily communicate through email, they'll just cut you off for a year or more, and then they'll just resume as though nothing's happened. So you see the protagonist, the female newsreader, make substantial recovery with her mental health problems and her borderline personality disorder with the help of a good therapist. So that's season 3 of the Newsreader. Now, I just finished watching 0 Day, a Netflix paranoid thriller starring Robert De Niro as a former president who's been asked to lead an investigation into a 1-minute electronic outage across the country that kills about 4,200 people. And I still don't know what I think about this show. I do know that I watched every minute. I watched it with care. I know that I didn't get a dopamine release from watching the show. It didn't make me feel great. It didn't make me feel terrible. I know that I didn't care about any of the characters except the former president, the lead, the Robert De Niro character. He seemed like a decent bloke. So, how's it going? Abdullah Aziz Al Nazal. I am from Australia, mate, and I now live in Los Angeles, and I'm walking around just outside of Beverly Hills. It's about 65 degrees, sunny, blue skies, nothing but blue skies. Rick Caruso gave a great interview to Barry Weiss of the Free Press about problems in California, problems in Los Angeles. So we had those massive fires here a few weeks ago, and the mayor fired the police chief, the fire chief, fire department head. We had a lesbian troika running the Los Angeles Fire Department. The fire department did an amazing job from the second day on, but they didn't pre-position resources and keep people on to be prepared for the extreme fire danger conditions. But Rick Caruso ran against the current mayor, Karen Bass, and lost by about 90,000 votes. And essentially it broke down that productive citizens, people living in West LA and the Valley, right, they overwhelmingly voted for Rick Caruso, and the welfare class, government workers, and union voters turned up for Karen Bass, and so we got a much less competent mayor of Los Angeles who showed herself to be clearly way over her head, in particular with regard to the fires. So now the question is, will Rick Caruso, major real estate developer and someone who ran the police commission and fired a very popular Los Angeles Police Department chief, a very popular black chief, because he wasn't competent, and brought in William Bratton, who drove down crime rates in LA to rates that we had not seen since the 1950s. So California should be Rick Caruso's oyster. All right, will he run for governor? Will he run for mayor? Interesting that Caruso had no criticisms and complaints about Gavin Newsom with regard to the fires. He says that the problem with the fires was entirely on the mayor of LA, Karen Bass. Anyway, back to Zero Day, starring Robert De Niro. So it wasn't a pleasurable watch. It wasn't fun. It wasn't rewarding. It didn't stimulate dopamine production. It was like one of those 1970s paranoid thrillers, like the Parallax View, but dealing with many of the themes that I talk about on my live stream, such as constitutional dictatorship, the suspension of civil liberties during a state of emergency, use of torture to elicit information from suspects, conspiracies, and then there's a character in it who's very similar to Tucker Carlson. Right, he looks like Tucker, he sounds like Tucker, he's got that Tucker vibe, that Tucker energy, that Tucker method of speaking, and he even damn looks like Tucker Carlson. So there's a Tucker Carlson character, there's a Jeffrey Epstein type character. There are just so many parallels to current events. But it's not highly rated. I think last I checked, it was below a 6 on IMDb. And normally IMDb is my favorite measure of whether a movie or a TV show is going to be any good. There was a movie about a writer that had like a 4 rating on IMDb that I loved. But generally speaking, IMDb seems pretty damn accurate when it comes to assessing whether or not I'm going to like a TV show. Now, if it's in a superhero category or science fiction, all right, it can have really high ratings, but I'm still going to ignore that because I'm not into those genres. And I tried the Netflix series, is it The Recruit, about a lawyer in his first days at the CIA. And it was just incredibly childish, so highly rated on IMDb, but I thought it was silly. Now, Zero Day, not highly rated. I wonder if it's going to get more attention. It's a high IQ series. It's not fun to watch. It keeps oscillating between an objective lens and then a subjective lens where we get to experience life as seen by the protagonist who's going through some mental health challenges. Ben Smith at Semaphore has a thoughtful essay on reassessing The Power Broker by Robert Caro. So The Power Broker is probably the most prestigious non-fiction book published in the United States in the last 50 years about Robert Moses, who was the most powerful man in New York from about 1930 until about 1970, even though he was never elected to anything. But he knew how to pull strings behind the scenes. What the hell? Yep, we're still going. Okay, we're still live. So I want to read some of the suggested links on The Power Broker. I mean, the book is enormous. I think it weighs in the hardcover version over 3 pounds. It's about 35 hours, 40 hours on Audible. Okay, it's interesting how little news coverage Susie Wiles is receiving. So she is Donald Trump's chief of staff. And normally, Chief of Staff is an incredibly important position that receive a ton of news coverage, but I don't see any news coverage about Susie Wiles. Actually, very rarely breaks into the news, and I think that's so impressive because she does not see it as her job to run Donald Trump. She sees it as her job to help Donald Trump. And so previous White House chiefs of staff, they often found themselves at cross purposes with Donald Trump. Not the last one, Mark Meadows, but the other ones. And so in his first term, Trump ran through 4 different chiefs of staff. But there's something different with Susie Wiles, and I just think it's so impressive that somebody can subordinate themselves to a higher task and not be leaking and not be trying to secure attention, but she's just there to do the president's bidding. I think that's pretty damn impressive. She's a very impressive woman. And what's interesting is how little this Trump White House, compared to previous Trump White House, is leaking. Hey, g'day, mate. So you do get some leaks about Elon Musk. But other than that, I'm surprised by how little backbiting and how little infighting and how little leaking is going on, right? The Trump administration seems united, with the exception of the Elon Musk and his detractors. But aside from that, it's surprising how cohesive and apparently high levels of trust there must be operating in the current Trump administration. Now, the $100 bill that is just lying around on the ground right now is something that Mark Halperin talks about, and that's trying to cover Donald Trump fairly. So the mainstream media, such as CNN and New York Times, they just reflexively usually go with an anti-Trump angle. And CNN has the wide open political center that it can build an audience upon. But instead, it's going left. It's going in an MSNBC direction. And I would think that there's a hunger for a centrist, commonsensical, non-ideological coverage of Donald Trump. Right? Just call the balls and strikes. Focus on what he does, how it affects people, instead of just using the unusual language as that he exhibits as an opportunity to try to trash Trump. Right? The mainstream media, not quite as reflexively anti-Trump as the first term. Right? They have tried to be more fair this time around. But still, there's the reflexive anti-Trump bias that still dominates. And you think that there should be an enormous audience for people who don't need to hear things spun in a Fox News pro-Trump direction, but just would like a fair and balanced attempt to be even-handed with regard to Donald Trump and his administration. I'm sure there are individual reporters. All right, I see individual stories that do strive to be fair to Trump and his team. And if I were more perspicacious, I could name various reporters. Mark Caputo, Axios. I think Axios does a pretty good job covering Trump. I think Politico is doing a better job this time around. Right, so Fox News creates its own cocoon where they spin things in a predictable pro-Trump, pro-MAGA, pro-conservative, pro-Republican direction. Right? And I can see why New York Times, which has over 11 million subscribers, why they would want to deliver the news that distinguishes the good guys from the bad guys in a way that pleases their 95% left of center subscriber base. My God, was that young blonde woman attractive? That's what I need to start the day. But just non-reflexive, non-reactive coverage of Trump would be nice. Because so far, still seems like this is an effective Trump administration, and there are hysterical liberals like Heather Cox Richardson, dominant liberal historian on Substack, who says that the Trump administration's peaked and there's nothing but downhill from here. Right, that strikes me as a hysterical reaction, not based in reality. But there are strong critiques that Elon Musk is leading a cost-cutting that is not targeted, that is often unnecessarily hostile and juvenile towards federal employees. The media is fixated on Trump parting ways with Elon Musk, and that just seems to absorb the headlines. And the media fixates on what leading Democrats are saying about Musk. But the personalities don't primarily matter here. What matters is the effectiveness of what Trump and Musk are doing, right? Where are they being effective? Where are they ineffective? Where are they stymied? Where do they appear to know what they're doing? Where do they appear unprepared? Right, that's the kind of analysis that we need. So Trump is maintaining his high level of energy. Right now, we're switching our focus to the House of Representatives to see if they can pass a budget. Trump's able to do a lot of things through executive order, but legislation, if not the most important part of what a president accomplishes, certainly has considerable importance. And the Republicans seem to be close. They seem to be about 2 or 3 votes away right now from passing a budget. Right, surely that they're going to get their act together. Right, this is an opportunity to reconfigure the federal government, reconfigure spending, put a higher priority on border enforcement, immigration enforcement, energy production. Right, cheap energy will be essential to Trump's plan to reduce inflation. You'd think they'd have to be able to get it done. So who are the other people who are pretty fair, even-handed when it comes to their coverage of Trump? Like, I like Brett Hume. He's a reliable conservative, but he also strives to be fair. Now, Mark Halperin and company say that we should get a lot more attention about veterans who are losing their jobs because of these DOGE cuts. And I think that misses what's most important, right? Is the government becoming more efficient and more effective through these DOGE cuts? That's more important than whether or not sometimes it's veterans who are getting laid off. Right? Effectiveness, efficiency, providing the goods and services the American people want, right? That should be the primary criterion for whether or not we're seeing good and effective government. Bye-bye.